Welcome, insiders. It is noon Eastern Standard Time in New York. This is Justin, Chief Experience Officer with Untapped New York. Happy to be here with you on this. As I put in the chat, it is a crisp day here in New York. It actually kind of feels like fall. Not sure where it is or what it's like where you guys are, but of course, please say hello and let everybody know where you are coming from today. We are very, very excited about today's presentation with Scott Francisco, who is going to tell us about his winning idea for reimagining the Brooklyn Bridge competition, which was hosted by Van Alen, but he's going to tell you all about it. B. Woods from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Martha from Hanover, Robert Morbeck from Rutledge, PA, whom I met in person finally at the World's Fairgrounds on Sunday. Robert, it was great to meet you. Pete, out in San Francisco. Hope things are going okay out in San Francisco. I have been reading the news and wow, hope you're being safe and well. Everybody from the West Coast. Cynthia from Baltimore. Hi, Robin. Back at the Berkshires, Robin. All right. Good to have you all with us. I'm going to drop my screen share and we are going to get going because what we have today promises to be a really, really cool conversation. We're actually going to do something a little different than we normally do. I have introduced Scott. Scott's going to introduce himself. We're going to play a video about his winning proposal. And then Scott's going to tell us a bit about his proposal, but he and I are going to have a really great conversation about the Brooklyn Bridge Forest and the Brooklyn Bridge itself. So this is going to be slightly more conversational and freeform normally. And we would also like you to get involved. So as we are talking, please put questions or comments that you have in the chat. I will be moderating. I'm also going to be in the weeds a little bit. So if we don't get to it immediately, don't fret, we'll get there. Carrie from Aurora, Colorado. Welcome, 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 everybody. All right, Scott, why don't you tell everybody who you are, say hi, and then I'll cue up the video.
Hi, everyone. This is great to be here with you. My first Untapped New York experience. And I'm calling in here from Montreal, Canada, which is my new home after leaving New York City a few years ago. I'm an architect by background, and I have a company called Pilot Projects Design Collective. We're a multidisciplinary design firm that works in environmental, urban, and a wide variety of infrastructure projects. We're a small company with a huge network of collaborators around the world. And some of our focus areas these days are working on issues of forests, wood, and cities. So a combination that's not always intuitive right out of the gates, but we've made it into a sort of an area of study that we believe cities have a really important role on helping to conserve the world's forests and the environment generally and the climate. And these things all fit together. And so the Brooklyn Bridge Forest is an outgrowth of years of thinking and working on these issues. So I'm really looking forward to telling you about our presentation, or about our proposal for the competition, and to talking with Justin and then chatting with you all.
Great. All right, so everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the little over 4 minute proposal video, which is great. It gives you a great overview. And then we will be right back with you to talk about what you are going to see. So I'm sharing my screen again. Okay, let me go to play. And here we go. Enjoy.
For more than 137 years, the Brooklyn Bridge has welcomed and inspired people from around the world. It's been a source of pride for New Yorkers and a symbol of what can be done against all odds. In our time of uncertainty today, the bridge remains a source of inspiration, and we believe it can become a platform for addressing some of today's most pressing problems. Over the past 10 years, our team, architects, designers, engineers, foresters, and ecologists, has been working together to forge connections between the Brooklyn Bridge, New York City, and a partnering tropical forest community. We're really excited to share our presentation with you, and we look forward to discussing it.
Today, humanity faces major challenges: the coronavirus pandemic, systemic inequality, loss of biodiversity, and climate change. These challenges are immense, but they are also an opportunity for imagination and courage, an invitation to fix broken systems, and to support new generations to co-create a future characterized by social equity and interdependence with nature.
Brooklyn Bridge Forest reimagines the bridge and the neighborhoods it connects as revitalized and expansive public spaces that are suited to today's needs while being adaptable to an unpredictable future. We reimagine the bridge as an icon of climate action and a symbol of the unique power that cities have to protect and restore nature locally and around the globe. At the center of our proposal is the idea that people from all walks of life must have a voice in the renewal and reimagination of such a beloved landmark and the city around it. So there are 4 basic pillars to our proposal: an expanded promenade, new cycling and alternative transportation infrastructure, microforests, and community engagement. Pillar 1, a historic wooden walkway will be rebuilt using planks sustainably sourced from a 200,000-acre partner forest in Guatemala. The new walkway will have pedestrian lookouts, places where people can safely pause, rest, and enjoy the view. Our innovative and equitable funding model invites participation from people of all ages and income levels to sponsor each of the 20,000 new planks. Pillar 2, the bridge will be a beacon for alternative, greener modes of transportation. Up at the promenade level, we propose a new dedicated 2-way bike path running alongside the pedestrian walkway. At the lower deck level, 2 traffic lanes will be immediately converted to use for bicycles and electric assist vehicles to improve access and safety while making a bold statement about New York City's commitment to low carbon transit. Pillar 3, at either end of the bridge, microforests will revitalize the urban landscape, providing access to nature in underserved areas. These small, biodiverse forests will help the city meet its sustainability goals and create opportunities for community building and education. And Pillar 4, community engagement will be the basis for all decision-making. Our unique co-design process, which we call the sandbox, will be implemented to ensure that the bridge serves the city as a whole, and especially its marginalized communities. Our proposal meets some of One NYC's most challenging sustainability goals head-on, while equipping the Brooklyn Bridge to support both present and future needs. By implementing the Brooklyn Bridge Forest, New York City will create 2.5 acres of magnificent outdoor public space with natural forests, triple the bicycle and pedestrian capacity on the bridge, unlock innovative pathways for NYC's climate action planning while protecting a rainforest, inherit replicable design components that can be implemented elsewhere in projects throughout the city, like park benches and other boardwalks, receive $20 million worth of self-funded sustainable infrastructure. And these outcomes are attributes of the sustainable, equitable future that we would like to cultivate. The Brooklyn Bridge Forest not only reimagines Brooklyn Bridge, it reimagines our relationship with nature, cities, and our global climate, using the Brooklyn Bridge to lead us there.
Very cool stuff. So, all right, Scott.
Yes,
I always, I've watched that video now twice. This will be the 3rd time. And I always, 2 things, one of which I want to get out on the bridge, especially on a day like today. And 2, I'm really jazzed about 2 topics that you tackle head on with this project. One of which is the growth of the promenade, which makes it more of a breathable space for everyone, bikers and pedestrians, because as a lot of us who have used the bridge know, it's not that way right now. But also your activation of the spaces around and in the anchorages, which I feel one of my biggest complaints about the bridge is that the city keeps us very far away from the anchorages, and they were spaces that the Roeblings really wanted to activate for public from the minute they designed them. That being said, I'm going to let you start with what you would like the insiders to know or to take away from that overview of the project, and then, like I said, we can get more into it. So go ahead.
That's great. Well, thanks for flagging those 2 areas. Those are 2 very important concepts that we built into our proposal. I'm going to give a little bit more background that the Brooklyn Bridge Forest is a concept that goes back 12 years And if some of you have looked into some of the writing that's happened since we won, explains the story. But 12 years ago, when I was living in Brooklyn and commuting over the Brooklyn Bridge, pretty much on a daily basis, often by foot or by bicycle, one day I decided to walk barefoot over the bridge, and I was just appreciating the boards on the promenade in a special way as I felt them under my bare feet, and I realized that they were tropical hardwood planks, and began to think about a consequence of that. And that's really what led to this project, and the team that's formed around this project over that 12 years is really an amazing group of people. So I want to say, again, reinforce that this is by no means a solo activity. There's really a dozen or so people that are core team members, and then probably hundreds, I would say, of people that have been participating in this for over the years. So when the competition was launched just in the end of January last year, just before COVID started to become a reality in our lives, it was really focused on the congestion of the bridge, as Justin's mentioned, and many of you have probably experienced that, especially in the last few years. Really, like when I was in New York, up until the very end of my time there, the congestion wasn't really that bad. It was sort of, sometimes it would be pretty bad, but I think in the last 5 years in particular, it's kind of gone through the roof. So the competition asked us to address that particular issue, and we brought our whole, decade of thinking on the sustainability factor of sourcing the wood and reaching out to the global supply chain to protect forests all together. So what you'll see in our presentation is that thinking that's both local and global. That's very important. The Brooklyn Bridge is a global icon as well as a local icon. And then also, as Justin said, the design of the promenade was part of Roebling's original vision very much from the beginning. It wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't something that was added on. It was totally integral to the design of the bridge as a place for people to walk and just as a public space. And you'll see in a quote from John Roebling from 1868 that he specifically describes the value of the promenade as one of the key features of the bridge. And we really wanted to preserve that experience for future generations. We didn't want to mess with that too much. We wanted to, as we said inside our team discussions, we want our grandchildren to experience the promenade much the same way our great-grandparents would have experienced it. And that's really important to us. And that involves the use of wood, the proportions of the promenade, and the way that it feels on the bridge, while understanding that there's some changes that need to be made if we're going to accommodate the flows of people and bicycles that are part of our reality today, and that are an important part of the changing city. To encourage pedestrian and bicycling use is very important. And then when it comes to the anchorages, as Justin said, those were spaces that were envisioned as part of the infrastructure of the city when Roebling created the bridge. And by the way, I'm saying the word Roebling, I'm saying the name Roebling. I'm sure most of you are very aware of the Roebelings, plural, that were involved in creating the bridge. Of course, John Roebling, the father, the patriarch, was the original bridge conceptual designer, but it was his son Washington who built the bridge and worked out every last detail of the bridge construction and the real design of the bridge. The working documents for the bridge were all done by Washington. And then, of course, as he took ill with the bends from going down into the caissons below the water, and was bedridden for the majority of the construction of the bridge, his wife Emily really took over a lot of the communication and site visits, and worked directly with the men on site to go back and forth between Washington, who continued his whole for the subsequent 14 years to work out every single detail of the bridge. So that's the basic story. So when I say Roebling, it's sort of, there's a blurry line between what John did, what Washington did, what Emily might have participated in.
Right.
But those anchorages were really vital spaces, and were used in the early years before the city kind of grew up around and either abandoned or overtook them with ramps and other things. And so reactivating those spaces was something that we we took seriously, but we also took in every case for our proposal a kind of incremental view of the change. If some of you saw the competition entries, you would have seen that some of the other finalists proposed what we would consider more kind of radical surgery, where in one case, all the ramps were removed and the bridge was completely detached from any vehicular car traffic. And our approach was to help the city make gradual moves towards restoring those spaces and gradually maybe decreasing the amount of car traffic over time and replacing that with some alternative transportation. So I'll pause there and let Justin come in with some more questions and thoughts.
Well, so what I think might be interesting, and we discussed this, Scott and I had a really great, robust conversation last week when we were talking about the presentation and talking about the dynamics between the Roeblings, and you know what they had all wanted to see. But I think it was pretty universal that everyone thought about the importance of giving people of all classes an equal place to experience the city and basically a park in the sky. And, you know, one of the interesting things is the accounts, and I believe this comes from The Great Bridge, which I know is a favorite book of both of ours. When people got up there, it was the highest they'd ever been because of the height of it. And there it is. And, you know, this is one of my favorite slides because it shows the original intent, which always was for carriage traffic. And then of course the trains and then the promenade on the top. So, yeah, why don't you riff on this a little bit?
Sure. So a couple of important things about this original cross section, and this is a cross section drawn before the bridge was built. The proportions finally were a tiny bit different than this, but the key proportion here that I wanted to indicate was this 16-foot wide promenade, which is structured into the trusses. So the main trusses of the bridge were spaced such that you could fit these trolleys, and these were cable-driven trolleys. And with this resulting space up top. And a key feature of this bridge, unlike many other bridges in New York, is that the pedestrians are up on the top and you get this clear view out over top of the traffic. And anyone who's walked over the Manhattan Bridge knows that it's a very different experience there. You're down you feel like you're kind of a second-class citizen walking over the Manhattan Bridge, whereas in the Brooklyn Bridge, you've got the key view. You're in the pole position here. So that's very important. And if I go to this next slide, this is our proposal in terms of the promenade, where we've added this bike lane off to the side, up above these girders. And in order to make that fit, we've elevated the promenade slightly, but still kept it recessed between the trusses, so that you had that experience of being sort of cradled in the bridge structure. We wanted that feeling that the promenade was still sort of tucked in there. And hopefully that comes through in some of the renderings. And I'm going to just quickly scroll through to this kind of experience where, again, the proportion of the cables, the trusses, and the promenade still exist in our proposal with the same width of planks here. And you can see off to the side the bike lane, which is visually accessible, but in some cases it's sequestered with a railing. But then in the center of the bridge, it all comes together. And you have the lookout spaces here on the left side and the bike path all occupying one flush plane, where the promenade has been slightly elevated so that everything comes together. So again, using this tropical hardwood sourced from a sustainable partner forest, and each of the planks with a sponsorship, so that forest can be renewed, maintained, and supported adequately to grow this wood. And then another key feature that relates to the anchorages is the idea of the microforests. So in this case, this is what we call the anchor forest. This is actually really very tiny element because it's just what we can fit into the flanks of the anchorage. Just before you can see, you walk out onto the wooden boardwalk on the anchorage, you're still on the stone structure, and you're cradled in this little microforest, and then you kind of launch out onto the bridge. I'm going to quickly go through to, I'm sorry, I'm doing this quickly here, but this is an example of one of the microforests on the Brooklyn side, and we're proposing what we're calling a pop-up bike ramp to allow bicycle traffic to get up onto the bridge within a very short order. So we have a vision of getting going on this immediately. And so this is an example of a space that is underused right now, and we could do this within a year and get bicycle traffic on. To put that into context, here, this is a cross-section diagram of the bridge with, here's the upper bike lane that I've been describing, and the promenade and the lookouts. But you see down below, we're also proposing that one on each side, car traffic lanes is converted into, on this side, a bike lane, two-way bike lane, on this side, an electric assist vehicle lane, to experiment with these new class of vehicles that includes electric scooters, electric bicycles, electric mopeds, etc., that require slightly different sort of speed profile than bicycles. And so in the end, we see that the Brooklyn Bridge will have not only this upper bike lane, that's probably going to take several years to plan, design, and build, but these lower lanes could actually be done immediately with a Jersey barrier. And that connects to this idea of getting the bicycles up onto that lower deck lane. So I'll pause there again. Justin, any questions with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, is the idea, and I mean, I think that's great, because I think one of the biggest frustrating facets of the bridge right now is the fact that bikers feel like, you know, the redheaded stepchildren of the bridge, because they're trying to use it to get to a destination. But meanwhile, you've got, you know, all of these tourists or people enjoying the bridge as a pedestrian packed like sardines on one side, and they drift off. And, you know, we've all been there. Was the idea of providing multi-level bike lanes sort of, the top bike lane is for those who want to just kind of have a leisurely bike with the view, and the lower bike lane is, I just need to get to Manhattan or Brooklyn, leave me alone? Exactly.
You hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head. We actually felt in the end that both were important, because if we just put the bicycles down below, you really lost that experience of this incredible elevated view of the city and the experience. And frankly, as someone who loves to cycle for leisure and for commuting, I just felt like, you know, if I only had the option of being down below, I was going to really miss out on something. On the other hand, let's face it, New York is full of, and will have even more in the future, cyclists who just really are there for getting from place to place, and we should really support that. So our proposal is that there's both, and that those folks who want to just get there the fastest would use the lower lane. And there's still, you know, you still have some fresh air and views through those trusses, but it's definitely not as exciting as being on the upper lane.
Sure. So we've actually had a couple of comments come in, and I think it might be, Scott, if that's okay with you, we can address them now, or if you'd rather address them later, it's up to you.
No, let's go for it. I'd love to hear from those.
Sure. So Nancy asked, will the walkers have unobstructed views on one side?
The answer is yes. So the concept here is on the bike lane side, there'd be a railing that would actually be a protective railing that would come up to just under 4 feet. But on the south side of the bridge, you have these lookout spaces, and hopefully you can see it in this diagram, where there'd be a glass or mesh railing which would not obstruct the views, and you'd have actually really even better views than you have now, because you'd be able to walk out to closer to the edge of the bridge and gather and pause there. So let's see if there's a different. I'm gonna just, as we're talking about this, I'll scroll back to another overview here. Shows that, but yeah, that's right. Unobstructed views, even more so than you currently have. You can see it in here. See this lady here in the orange dress? She's out there on one of these sort of promontories that we're creating to even get better views. This is in this drawing, you can see it more clearly in the sense that you have the original promenade, then you have these lookouts that are up above the trusses, and you have the bike lane on this side.
Got it. So Fred Flancer, hi Fred, how are you? It's good to see you back on our talks. He said he feels like there's a little bit more deference to the bike lanes. We need additional space for pedestrian. Seems like the design does not take into account the amount of people on the boardwalk at peak times. Now, how much more space are you providing for pedestrians in this proposal here? Because obviously you are trying to give them more room to breathe.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's a great question. Our estimation is that we're tripling the capacity for pedestrians. And here's how we come to that conclusion. So right off the bat, we're taking all the bike traffic off the promenade. So that's doubling the capacity from what you have currently. By adding these lookouts, and I'm going to go back to the view, it shows it maybe a bit more completely here. By adding these lookouts on the south side all the way along, we're basically taking all of the stop and look traffic off of the promenade and giving it space. So you've basically taken the congestion factor of anyone who wants to stop and take pictures and huddle around, have a tour guide talk to you about something. That's all sandwiched into the 16 feet at best, right? Which is then divided in half because you have the cycles. So our effective capacity is 3 times what it is currently for pedestrians and 3 times what it is for cyclists in our proposal.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question. I mean, and that's a semi-scientific view because we're literally doubling the width. And then we're by adding these lookouts, we're really changing the whole sort of activity profile of how the promenade is used, because a lot of the congestion on the bridge comes from small groups of 2 or up to 10 and 15 people that are stopped on the promenade and forcing everyone to walk around. And then one other key concept here, see if I can, anyway, I love this shot because it just shows that, you know, that sort of that same proportion here from the past, and we're trying to capture that in our new vision. But the way the cables currently come through, sorry, this is a very small photograph, but if you can just zoom in with your eyes here to this is as narrow as 10 feet here. And this is I'm sorry to say, a horrible intervention that DOT has enacted on the bridge, where they've encased the cables with these massive steel cages. And this just happened about 6 years ago. Previous to that, there was a very modest, much more like this photograph here, just a little guard around the cable. So our intention is to remove those, and that sort of widens it up a little bit and just visually widens it as well. And given that there's some security concerns, we believe there's some alternative measures that can be taken to, you know, deal with whatever security concerns there are. In fact, frankly, we have a hard time understanding, even as an architect and an engineer, what specifically they're trying to guard against here. But I'm sure they have their reasons. So yeah, we'll be relieving some of the congestion coming from that pinch point, removing the cycles from the promenade, and creating these lookouts.
Those were recent additions, right? I seem to remember even in college in the 90s, those didn't exist.
No, this is just about 6 years ago that those were added. There was, again, a little guardrail around them, but nothing like what this is today. And presumably it's something to do with, it's a combination of concern of, I guess, an attack on the cables through some sort of explosive, and also making sure that people can't climb the cable, but they also have these protectors.
They have the gates up there, yeah. I've been asked multiple times on the tours, you know, what the functions were of these, and yeah, and as people are actually, they're saying in the chat as well, from climate anti-suicide measures and, you know, basically guarding from the climbing. Robin has mentioned a point about the views for walkers. So she said, obviously this proposal favors the pedestrians having a south side view, but not a north side view because the bike lane is blocking it. Are there any concessions for people who are, like Robin said, some of us like to photograph the north side? Will you have any lookout points or concessions for people who want to look at the north side from the pedestrian lanes?
Well, we have something called, it's a great question. And I would say that there's, first of all, I should say that this proposal is a draft. And so there's plenty of room, and there would be a lot of refinements to this design. So these kinds of questions will get asked as we move forward and be resolved. What we have is something called the bike stop. So we've created these lookouts for cyclists that, you know, at different points, pedestrians could come across the bike lane and use those lookouts as well. They're designed to allow the cyclists to stop and have their view on the north side. The other thing is that, you know, it's in these central areas, the view isn't cut off. It is conscripted a little bit by this opaque rail, which, by the way, we may find that the opacity of that rail doesn't need to be coming up to that 3-foot height. Maybe it's only coming up 2 feet, and then you have something more transparent. So let's just say that if that railing was not opaque, you'd have the same view more or less that you have now. It just the fact that there's a railing there. So it's a good question. Right now we are definitely favoring the south side view and the straight ahead view. You still get a panorama. Just see if I can go to sort of this would be a pretty typical view. So you can see at eye level here, you're still seeing the city on the north, but you're just not looking down in the same way that you did previously.
Mel asked, did the proposal design fall within all landmark regulations? Has any of it gone for landmark review yet?
No, not formally. One of the jurors was from the Landmarks Commission, and I think we actually had strong support from her point of view, because our submission was the one that maybe took the heritage of the bridge most seriously. The competition proposal was asking for some pretty radical thinking on the bridge, and we, I think, took the most conservative position. But the review process has not happened in any official way yet. But I should just say right now, lest I forget to say it later, that I'm sure there's folks who are with us today that have insights and maybe connections. I would love to hear, and Justin, I'm happy for you to share my email with anyone here on ideas, things that we need to consider, people that we might want to talk to, community groups, anything at all that can help to inform our project and also, you know, hopefully move it forward. I would say that what I'm concerned about is first of all, I should clarify, winning this competition does not give us this commission. This is not a commission competition. This was an ideas competition. And so the city is bound in no way to do anything or use us to do anything. Our team is very much of the let's do this mode. We are ready and capable of delivering the design, but we don't know what's going to happen. So we're currently investigating, politicking, and offering our services to the city. We've met with Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan, who was very enthusiastic about our proposal, and with lots of very good questions, but so I say enthusiastic. They resolved to be supportive of our concepts and help to move them forward. DOT, as many of you know, is the ultimate say in the way the bridge gets maintained and revamped. And so there's going to be a lot of hoops to jump through to get anything going. And we're pushing hard to do something. Our concern is that if they go with another set of ideas, that it won't be so deferential to the bridge. So we see ourselves as being kind of protectors of the bridge history while still solving some of these urgent challenges.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is evident in the fact that you are. I know I keep saying this. I sound like I'm banging the same pot, but it's important to me. And what I do is that you are keeping in the spirit of how the bridge was designed originally. Which actually would lead me to want to move on to talk a little bit more about the Anchorage activation. But before we do that, you have already established the relationship with the rainforest in Guatemala, correct? Where the wood would be coming from?
Yes, that's right. I've been to this community about 3 or 4 times, and maybe more important than that is that the Wildlife Conservation Society, whose headquarters is in New York City, but work all over the world conserving wild areas, have really helped to establish this community with the certification from Forest Stewardship Council, with their forest management plans, and their whole conservation ethos is So Wildlife Conservation Society is one of the key partners on this project. So we wouldn't be doing any of this without them. If some of you know them, they're just one of the world's most trusted conservation organizations who have a very good reputation for working with communities on the ground. And so this is a 200,000 acre community concession in Petén, Guatemala, which is the northern part of Guatemala. And they have a track record of the highest rate of tropical forest canopy conservation of any of the regions around, including the national parks. But they're much better than the national parks at conserving forests, and they do it through community use and a very detailed plan. Now you can see in this little photo here, this thumbnail, this is mapping every single tree in a given area that they're going to go in and do controlled harvest. So they know every single tree, and they know which ones are the ones that are suitable for harvesting. And they never take the best trees. They always take the second or third tier trees to allow the best trees to propagate. And they take 1 tree per acre every 40 years. So that's the level of conservation that we're supporting by doing this.
Cool. I really like the idea. And I like the idea of sponsorship, because I think that that's a really neat way to get the community involved. And people love, you know, as we see at Ellis Island and other projects around the city, people love to be able to be a part of it, and let's be honest, be recognized for it too. So yeah, I think that was a very elegant solution. Now, like I said, I guess, well, we're 12:36, but in the interest of time, could you speak more about the anchorages and, yes, and that part of the proposal?
Let me go to, by the way, sorry, quick, this is a couple of leaders from the community who came over to New York City in 2015, bringing some sample wood, and this was their first experience of winter. This was January, I believe, 2015. So we had to outfit them with some winter clothes. It was quite exciting. And here's an example, just a concept of how the plank sponsorship might look. Quite subtle and oriented on people, not corporations that would be individual sponsors. Okay, so Justin's question about the anchorage is very important. I'm going to go to, actually, I'll pause here for a second. We did these timelines for the competition because we wanted to see the time in 3 different tiers. With the long history, we did a 200-year timeline, a 20-year timeline, and a 2-year timeline. I thought that was really important. And we then did a phase, what we called phase 0, which is the competition organizers were very keen on what could be done immediately, given the urgency of some of these things. And so the anchorage areas fit into that phase 0 in a certain way. There was 2 particular areas. One is this Brooklyn Anchorage Plaza, and I'll show you more details on that. And this is a little tiny sketch here. And then on the Manhattan side, there was the idea of utilizing some of the anchorage vaults for some youth programming, and then the microforest around that area. So I'm going to go to, well, I'll start with this rendering. So this is on the Brooklyn side. For those of you that know this area, this is called Anchorage Plaza. It's currently just a windswept sort of dirt pit that's being used to park trucks in and store supplies. So we want to convince the Parks Department, who are the official custodians of that land, to let us do this pop-up. I'm going to use that word a lot because New York has a tradition of pop-up installations that are done quickly, inexpensively, externally funded, that demonstrate an idea. And that's what we want to do here. We want to show that this space can be activated for public use with vendors using these vaults. We don't know if we're able to penetrate and would want to even penetrate the stone sort of diaphragm in the vault, or if we just have to use the sort of section out front for small vendor spaces. We'd create a boardwalk which emulates the boardwalk of the promenade, and then plant this microforest amidst this new bike ramp. So if you go back to the aerial view, here's that sample boardwalk. Here are these shipping container pop-up vendor spaces for community businesses, some additional bike parking here, spaces for meeting, just public spaces for general use that could also be potentially booked for hosting small events. and then this biodiverse microforest starting to bring back some of the plant species and animal species that would have been part of the original island ecosystem. So that's the anchorage on that one side. I don't have a rendering of it handy, but on the other side of the bridge here, there's another component of this. It's actually linked up here through a passageway to the other side. So we've got a microforest component over there too. So that's basically turning this anchorage area, or this is really technically this is the approach. The anchorage is a little bit further along. The approach back into a public space, but we're focused kind of on the shorter term version of that to get that space activated now, and we realize that there will be long-term thinking, more major interventions that would happen to really restore it into its full glory, which would probably involve, opening these vaults up, turning them into long-term usable space. That may take 10 years before that can happen, but we want to show that this can happen now and do it in an affordable and low risk way for the city.
Yeah, which on the Brooklyn side, I mean, the Anchorage vaults were used as event spaces.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know how long ago it was that they stopped doing that.
I think it was 2006. I think when the DOT came in and did, and if anybody knows better than me on this chat, please let me know. But in my research, I think it was opened up at some point in the 80s and, was a robust area for art shows and performances and private parties. And you can actually, when you go inside, you see it was designed that way. There's the time capsule right on the other side of the entrance. And then in 2006, when the DOT came in and started doing a lot of renovations on the ramps on both sides of the bridge, they shut that down for security measures and a whole bunch of other reasons. It seems to me that today the DOT is using it as kind of like a storage area inside, but they were event spaces for a while.
We probably don't have time in this session, but if you wanted to open up a Google Earth view, we could sort of do a little bit of a flyover. But in the meantime, I'll just show you this image on the Manhattan side. This one is really focused on how this bike lane would exit. And some of you may know that the ramp that goes down to Park Row is blocked off. In fact, I moved to New York in 2005 and it was already blocked off. So I hardly knew that it existed, but it's barriered here. We're suggesting that it gets reopened for bike use and creates a kind of public plaza for cyclists to use here with a little cafe. And then here we're showing this on the corner of the Nitra Smith House property, a microforest that kind of connects over to some of these spaces. This is a pretty difficult and challenging area over here, but we want to activate at least one, if not a few of the vaults for this youth programming. Here you can see the little anchor forest that would be part of this is the anchorage itself proper right here. And this would sort of mark the anchorage as you're coming up the approach. So here's the descent onto that ramp. This would be looking up, coming up the ramp before you get right onto the bridge. You'd have a city bike dock and a pop-up cafe there. We didn't get to it in this rendering, but I'd like to bring some of those forest elements onto this bridge as well. And this is the current ramp. It's being used by NYPD for parking. Then that's it. And that was closed off post 9/11 with fears of a truck bomb coming into the police to the police headquarters. First of all, bicycles don't fit the category of risk, so there's no reason that they couldn't be using this ramp. And also it's a nice transition from kind of this sort of lockdown phase in this area to something more active and engaging. So we hope that the NYPD will relinquish this ramp to be used. It's I think a good time for NYPD to find some olive branches or do some positive things in the community. So we'll see how that fits in. And then in more detail here, zooming in on here's the anchorage and here's some of the approach vaults. Either one or all of those vaults, we would love to program with youth activities engaging. I mean, this NYCHA neighborhood here is just one, but there's all kinds of neighborhood potentials. And we're focused on youth here. I mean, that would be dispersed throughout the proposal, but the concept, I'm just going to flip through these. So this is the microforest on the NYCHA property. Here's the Anchorage Vault. You can see it across the way, and here's the microforest on top there. And this is, again, a kind of pop-up concept using mass timber structures, prefab structures, which are becoming quite popular, showcasing that technology that I think would also interest young people, and then sort of slipping this thing in. We call it the Caisson Studio, and I spelt it wrong in my sketch. I think it's supposed to be 2 S's, but some of you may know that the foundations for the towers are built out of wood, and they were massive timber kind of containers that were pushed down to the bottom of the East River. And so sort of emulating that, and then making a workshop clubhouse kind of space for young people to study engineering and structures and city history in a really fun environment with mentors coming in for guest visits and lectures and things. We just felt was a really important piece of this, that if we don't get young people involved in thinking about new approaches to the city and also its history, we're losing what the next generation needs to have to contribute. So we wanted to build that in. Here's the existing condition of the Anchorage Vault there, and our proposal would be something like this. And again, this is a very preliminary design. And basically, let's say it's a prototype for what could happen in any of the other vaults. There's I can't remember the total number, but it's at least 10 vaults as it goes from the Anchorage down through the approach. But like on the Brooklyn side, we could do pop-up vendors, and the south side of the Manhattan approach, there's all kinds of opportunity. We did lots of sketches for just activating that public space over there, getting something going. We've been in discussion with Pace University, who's interested in doing a microforest, and they're on the south side. So we're hopeful that they'll be able to apply some pressure as well. But maybe I'll pause there for some more Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, and I will speak to the fact, if anybody, well, we do have a question from Pete, which we'll get to in a second, because it was actually going to be a question I'd ask you, but I like the fact that you're concentrating on the Manhattan Anchorage for youth engagement because of the density of the housing projects in that area. I taught at a school right at the foot of the bridge that serviced a lot of those kids, and they had nowhere to go but the Brooklyn Banks, which was taken away from them again in 2006. So, the bridge became sort of, instead of a place where they could engage with their neighborhood, it became a hindrance because there was nowhere for them to go. So I kind of like the idea of reopening the bridge to the people of the neighborhood, because again, it's very prohibitive now, which I think is a shame. I understand why, but this is one of my favorite parts of your proposal. Is there anything anybody would like to ask Scott before I ask Pete's question, which is a really great wrap-up question, which was on the plan to begin with? Well, Fred says he'd like to see it come to fruition. Thank you, Fred. But Pete asks, what are the city's next steps and timeline? So where do you go from here, Scott?
So perhaps as soon as I get off of this call, one of my to-dos today is to reach out to Community Board 3. So after our meeting with Community Board 1, they've given us a thumbs up, and they said, get through to Community Board 3, and then let's try to close the loop. There's an introduction, sort of a recommendation being put forward to DOT to talk to us, to work with us. We're also we're starting a fundraising process. So we see see if I can flip to it here quickly, the phase, what we're calling phase 0, which was getting this first bike lane and the Brooklyn microforest. Let's see, hold on, these are just examples. Sorry about this, flipping through here. we would like to do that under de Blasio's remaining year and a bit. That would mean acting immediately. And so we're trying to raise between $2 and $4 million of private sector money to support the Brooklyn Anchorage Plaza with this bike ramp here, and the bike lane, which is fairly low cost. It's essentially jersey barriers and paint and some signage and things, and then the Manhattan ramp. Let's see if I can flip back to that, which includes that bike plaza with the cafe. So that's a package pilot that we believe is our foot in the door to the longer term concepts. I don't know if we'd get this understory structure done within that time frame and budget, maybe there's even a quicker version to pilot it with a shipping container or something. But yeah, our goal is work fast, try to get something happening that's positive with this in this coming year, and we need a lot of stakeholders brought together to do that. And then that sets us up for the longer term thinking on the redesign and rebuild of the promenade, which is probably a 2 to 5 year project, depending on how quickly the city wanted to act. All of this falls under the sort of umbrella of the mayoral election coming up in a year, and whether the candidates are going to take this on as a platform piece, or at least give us a kind of a nod of approval of some sort. We're starting outreach to all the mayoral candidates. Corey Johnson was really a key figure in moving this competition forward. He's the speaker of the city council, and so he's very aware of all of this, and he's, as we understand, running for mayor, as is Gail Brewer, from president of the Manhattan Borough. So yeah, we're starting all of that process, but I would love to hear if anyone, either on this call or after, if anyone has ideas for us how to advance this.
Yeah, and I have put, Scott, your email address in the chat for everybody, and also links to the project website and to Pilot Project's website as well. So we definitely encourage all of you who have thoughts or connections or ideas to reach out to Scott. Nancy asks, has there been any thought on how the increased bike traffic would be treated once it exits the bridge area? Increased accidents, I think, is what you were saying, right, Nancy? Would be treated.
Maybe clarify the question. Is it so, you mean like places like this where the bikes are coming down to the ground in Manhattan or in Brooklyn? Is it specific to one of the sides, or just in general?
Let's see. Nancy, do you have any thoughts on that? Has there been any thought how the increased, could be increased accidents, just in general? She said just in general. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's always a good question. I think we're really depending on the advocacy for cycling and all the bike lane. I mean, there's a tremendous infrastructure of people and resources for bike lanes in the city, and we're not trying to solve all of those problems. I think it would be considered a success if there was more bicycles in New York because of this project. I don't know that this project would increase the number of bicycles, but if it did, all the better. And how those are handled when they reach the ground. Just see if there's an overview here. Like, for example, this new ramp would come down to Park Row South, and it connects to a bike lane infrastructure that's already in place, and actually has been the capacity of which is being increased already. So in some ways, the location here is quite good. Likewise, we've done a study on the Brooklyn side, but it doesn't show up in these drawings. But basically, this connects right to a bike lane infrastructure coming down from. I'd have to look at the map, but basically, as you come down from Tillery, you come down right and land right in this plaza area on Washington Street. So there's a bike lane going here. We've thought about maybe Washington getting closed down to car traffic as a possible measure, just because it's such a popular destination for pedestrians, tourists, and bicycles. But those are, as we say, bigger fish to fry than we wanted to take on. We want to, offer these, and then DOT would have to really take these and figure out the mechanics of it.
That would be a big fish, but you're right. There are a lot of Washington in recent history has become such a place to stop and take pictures of that iconic view that I see people laying in the street in the middle of the street to get that shot. I'm like, oh wow, you guys are really taking your life in your hands, huh? Great. So Fred sums it up pretty well too in his comment that separating the bikes and pedestrians should be priority. That we are in a very cantankerous dance because I've been both. I've been a biker, I've been a pedestrian, I've been a tour guide on the bridge, and it's not a good situation for either. It's not any more a pleasurable experience, and as we've seen with the pandemic, biking and people using bikes has increased exponentially. I mean, more people are biking, and the Brooklyn Bridge is a really great direct way to get from Brooklyn to Lower Manhattan. And sometimes the Manhattan Bridge is just not where you want to go. People say, well, use the Manhattan Bridge. Sure. I mean, and I have before, but it doesn't serve the same function as going right to, City Hall, Park Row, Center Street. And I think that this is a nice solution. And of course, as Scott had said, there's obviously things that can be tweaked and nothing is set in stone, but I think that this is a really wonderful proposal, Scott. And I really do, I think you have thought of all of the things that are on New Yorkers' minds right now, including sustainability, including making more accessibility available for everybody, and figuring out where bikes go. Nancy said, not expecting an answer, just think it needs to be in the discussion going forward, part of the broader city planning, which is true. One of the things I've noticed lately, I was on the street in Brooklyn the other day, and I witnessed somebody get hit by a car on a bike.
Wow.
And it was a hit and run. He didn't stop.
Wow.
And lost his mirror. And, and then I was at a bike shop yesterday getting a new chain on my bike, and two people came in and they had been hit by cars. So we really need to, they had to get their bikes fixed. We really need to figure out this balance, not only on the bridge, but all over the city, how we can all, happily coexist together now that more people who are not regular bike riders in the city are trying to become regular bike riders in the city for many reasons, sustainability, for commuting, for, not, risking COVID in the subways, whatever it is that you're doing, because a lot of people are obviously taking their life into their hands at this point.
Yeah, it's really important. And the culture of the relationship between cars and bicycles is something that needs work, mostly from the car side, but I would say also from both sides.
Both sides too, sure. Yeah, definitely.
It strikes me, actually, this is an idea you guys can all claim helpful authorship of, because I think of all the cars coming across the bridge, we could use these barricades for messaging on the car side of that to basically find the right way to help educate cars about the importance of being with bicycles. I mean, again, that you don't want to anger the cars. You want to really bring them in to feel like there's not an animosity. So I think there's work to be done in many different ways. Every driver of a car needs to be taking responsibility for sharing the road with pedestrians and bicycles. And if we could actually solve that problem and had a culture of respect, mutual respect on the roads, I think we'd have more people riding bicycles and less accidents, more accountability, and that's the way we need to be headed. In 5 years from now, what I hope for New York City is that when you move to New York or you're in New York, you feel like this is a place that respects multimodal transportation. Cars are looking out for me, and there's an encouragement to use non-fossil fuel oriented transit and not the other way around, which is I'm taking my life into my hands and I'm out there on my own. It should feel the opposite.
Right. And that's a really good way to put a really great period on this great presentation. And of course, I love the fact that you would use something as iconic as the Brooklyn Bridge, which also needs that attention, to improve the experience overall, to fulfill the vision of the designers who gave us such a beautiful piece of New York for us. So thank you very much, Scott. Again, please, if you want to be in contact with Scott, his email is on this chat. Get it while you can. And if you would like to, I can send you the transcript of the chat afterwards, once it's downloaded. Insiders, just programming that's coming up this week. Tomorrow evening, once again at 6 o'clock, we are in person at Art Tech House for Intangible Forms. If you are in New York and you haven't gone, go ahead. We've got plenty of tickets, and I believe we added a date on for next Wednesday. Thursday, we're doing the history of tennis with Adrian Brun, a history of tennis in New York City, which should be fun. And then next Monday night, Glory be Columbia, the live virtual reading of my new play, which is in partnership with the SS Columbia Project, restoring one of the last day steamers left in America. That's at 7 p.m. And new development insiders, and we'll be putting this up. We're going to do an insiders after party. Right after, you can come in, join, talk to me, the director, the actors, and bring a drink, because, you know, what's a show without an after party, right? So I'll jump off, get a drink, come back, and then we'll just have the discussion. You can hang out with us. We'll put that on so you can register. It's not on the calendar yet. We'll put it on by the end of the day. So I thank you all. Thank you, Scott, again. Everybody have a wonderful day. Stay safe, everybody. And I hopefully will see you on Thursday.
And
Bye.
Please do reach out to me. I'd love to hear from anyone. Just any kind of comments or thoughts, please do send them my way. Great. Thanks, everyone.
And please feel free to email me if you did not get Scott's email address. I'm happy to send it along. Thank you. Bye, guys. Have a good day.